There are two ways in which any government can proceed. One is a way based on what you and I would call a free society, which is enshrined right at the heart of the American Constitution. The other one is a way which allows only one view, both of economics and politics.
Thank you for joining us. You are listening to A Radio, and this is The Morning Moment. We're on weekdays, 11:45 Eastern. Follow us on Spreaker.com and click on the like button. For some time, I've been meaning to look up this pillar of virtue, but for some reason or another, time got the best of me, but no more. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the star in his own political mind, the one and only, and appearing for 7 days only. Don't miss the one and only Adam Schiff. The name says it all, doesn't it? A complete letdown. So I decided to look into this beacon of truth, justice and the American way. And I'm going to quote to you a few different pieces. And if I tell you he's a graduate of Stanford and Harvard, that's pretty much where you start from. And he comes from Massachusetts, a socialist state, and somehow he managed to move to California, another socialist state. So that's the left coast talking to the right coast and ignoring what they call flyover country. This first piece is from truthfeednews.com via Breitbart. Representative Adam Schiff, the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, was previously financially aided by George Soros, financed through MoveOn.org, to win his congressional seat. Gosh, what a surprise. Schiff was also awarded the Toll Fellowship, which is sponsored by the Council of State Governments, a non-profit that monitors federal government activities and is heavily financed by, wait for it, Soros, and is heavily financed by Soros's Open Society foundations. The Open Society Soros-funded groups have additionally supported a number of Schiff's legislative efforts. Schiff has been helping to lead the Democrats in an unsubstantiated charge of alleged collusion between President Trump and Moscow. Last month, Schiff delivered the opening statements at a congressional hearing which laid out the case for an alleged Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election. This reporter previously documented serious problems with Schiff's charges, which include wild conspiracy theories and heavy reliance on a questionable source. In largely forgotten history, Schiff's 2000 congressional campaign against Republican incumbent Jim Rogan was aided by MoveOn.org. On July 1, 2000, Wall Street Journal reported the radical group's fundraising efforts for Schiff. The congressional seat was particularly important since Rogan had gained fame after he was selected to be one of the 13 House managers in the 1998 impeachment case of Bill Clinton. Rogan was a supportive of Clinton's impeachment and became a hero in the Republican Party, i.e. he was a target. So we move on to another piece. This piece is from Roger Stone. You know, that one that the judges try to shut up because they don't like him having free speech. It's from stonecoldtruth.com. It's very short. Despite the partisan claims of Congressman Schiff, a huckster and a conman of the first magnitude, and others of his ilk, my submitted statement and testimony to the House Intelligence Committee was entirely accurate. He goes on to say, Mr. Schiff is engaging in frivolous semantics, shifty word games and non-material hair-splitting in a shameless bid for partisan advantage. If Mr. Schiff had any proof that I had advanced knowledge of the source or content of an alleged hack or stolen emails published by WikiLeaks, or that I have received anything of the kind, I challenge him to produce it, just as with his previous claim to have seen substantial evidence of Russian collusion with the Trump campaign, and producing none. The congressman is full of Schiff. unquote. This next piece kind of goes off in a different direction, but it gives you a bit of character, and I use that word in inverted commas. This piece is from the netspies.com. Los Angeles, California. The LA Times reporter and assistant managing editor Christina Bellatori dropped another bombshell in what can only be described as an ongoing US congressional and political sex and domestic violence scandal this afternoon. Do you remember hearing anything about this, ladies and gentlemen? Because I certainly don't. The Rob Porter domestic violence fiasco seems to have turned more than just the White House upside down. Bellatori told the Net Spies via Skype that not only has everything been turned upside down, but it seems that abuse victims are literally falling from the sky. Bellatori was contacted by Will Bottom, who claims to be the gay lover of California Congressman Adam Schiff. Will contacted me and told me that he had been a victim for far too long and wanted to speak out, Bellatori told us. Mr. Bottom stated that he has been Mr. Schiff's gay lover for many years and has endured a plethora of physical and emotional and sexual abuse, unquote. Bellatori went on to quote Mr. Bottom, "I call Adam Schiff's," I'm not going to pronounce that, because it sounds like his name and he looks like it. Anyway, I think it's meant to be Shih Tzu. Anyway, always tells me that my stuff is too small and that I don't pound him hard and deep enough. I'm sorry about that. That hurts my feelings, man. Then he beats me up with his little fists if I don't get him off just right. I have to put up with a lot of crap from him, but I love him, man. He has even pimped me out to his friends on occasions. I never really minded him pimping me out too much until he made me hook up with, this is what it says, Bernie Sanders. That dude smelled like mothballs or something. That's what it says there. Mr. Bottom provided Bellatori with several pictures, most taken by Schiff, that showed the horrific extent of Schiff's cruelty and perversion, unquote. Now, I just want to say for the record, I don't know whether that's a Bernie Sanders. It doesn't say. Or the Bernie Sanders. It doesn't say. Quote, "Anyone who treated an animal in such a manner would have fined themselves with a lengthy jail sentence," related Bellatori. "This is a human being. It seems like high time to start holding these politicians accountable for their sick, vulgar, and reprehensible behaviours," unquote. And that's the piece. Make of it what you will, my friends. Don't remember hearing about that, do you? Here's another piece from politicsusa.com. In it, Schiff is talking to another paragon of virtue, Jake Tapper of CNN, discussing why Donald Trump must be crazy if he thinks he won the presidential election when he didn't win the popular vote. Here's the piece, but you have to ask the question, don't you? Are you crazy for even asking that question? Don't you know how the electoral system works in the United States? If you took that approach, then you would only need California and New York to win everything, wouldn't you? Isn't that the whole point? Schiff was asked about invoking the 25th Amendment and removing Trump from office, and he delivered a very thoughtful answer. I certainly think there's an issue with the president's capability. There's some attribute of his character that makes him seemingly incapable of introspection and a broad understand of what the country really needs. And I think it's a question people are asking. What is going on with this president? What can explain this kind of behaviour? It began at the very beginning, Jake. I remember when he won the election and within days seemed to suggest that the only reason that he didn't win the popular vote was millions of people came to the country and illegally voted. And I thought to myself, oh my God, this man is not only not going to grow with the job, but is willing to state things that are patently untrue. I am convinced that if you took somebody off the streets of America and you said, you've become president, but here's the deal, you didn't win the popular vote, they wouldn't have the common sense to say, look, I'm going to do everything that I can to win over everyone. I realise many people, indeed most people, didn't vote for me, but he didn't do that. He's not capable of doing that. I don't understand why, but I do understand what a serious problem it is. And I think more than when I say it or when Jackie Spears says it. In fact, that Bob Corker now says things along the same lines shows a broadening recognition that there are some serious issues with our president that aren't going to go away, that aren't going to get better, and indeed, with the pressures of the job, may well get worse. Schiff argued that because of Trump's problems, he needs the best people around him in the White House, not people like Bannon, Miller and Gorka. Representative Schiff's answer was one of the most reasonable that you will come across about Trump's issues. Schiff didn't call Trump crazy. He didn't call Trump mentally ill, but he did make the case that it should be clear to every American that this president has some kind of mental or character problem that prevents him from doing a key part of the job that involves understanding the needs of the entire country and representing the whole country. Donald Trump is acting like the only constituency that matters is the one that won him the Republican nomination. Trump has revealed himself to have problems, but as long as most congressional Republicans turn a blind eye to Trump's issues, the only solution to those problems will be to elect a Democratic Congress in 2018. Now that piece was from Politics USA, but clearly they're just so biased and don't understand Trump. They don't want to listen to him. Anything he says or does is wrong. How can you have a conversation, a dialogue with any individual, group or body that thinks you're wrong before you even open your mouth? And that's the biggest problem with American politics, and the same with Canadian politics too. And British politics, come to that. The next piece is from The Spectator, spectator.org. In the course of the Trump wiretapping brouhaha and the Trump-Russia conspiracy claim, the face of one congressman, Adam Schiff, seems to appear everywhere in the news as the lead Democrat of the House Intelligence Committee. He's managed to attract huge media following who, not surprisingly, hang on every word he utters while never questioning any of his pronouncements. I happen to know him a little. When I served in the California State Assembly in the late 90s, Schiff was a state senator. He appeared to me as a sober-minded man with a serious demeanor as a former federal prosecutor. He gave the impression he was a moderate Democrat, perhaps willing to cross over to support Republican bills. The minority Republicans needed Democrat votes to get anything passed, so we were hopeful he would break with the loons who controlled the California legislature. Indeed, he would sometimes act like he sympathized with our positions, but in the end, he turned out to be a charade. When the vote came, he always sided with the hard left. I always thought of him as shifty, and thus a few of us privately referred to him as Shifty Schiff. Indeed, Schiff earned perfect on the near-perfect scores of California's gaggle of hard-left groups and was part of a generation of socialist and progressive leaders in California. I'm going to say that again, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, Schiff earned perfect or near-perfect scores by California's gaggle of hard-left groups and was part of the generation of socialist/progressive leaders in California who did away with the few remaining obstacles to California becoming the nation's premier hard-left utopia. Under their leadership, California became a progressive paradise as they passed numerous bills granting benefits for illegal aliens and funding elaborate global warming schemes, expanding the power of labor unions, and passing all kinds of incredibly onerous regulations that made it nearly impossible for the private sectors to survive. Just think about that for a moment, ladies and gentlemen. This guy is in the House of Representatives and he's fighting hard to get a Senate seat. There was never a tax or regulatory scheme that Schiff and his buddies opposed. The rest was predictable. Thousands of businesses fled California, unemployment rocketed, the standard of living plummeted, and huge swaths of California are today indistinguishable from the third world. Let me just say that last bit again. There are huge swaths in California today that are indistinguishable from a third world country. This is what liberals do. This is what Democrats do. This is what socialists do. You've been warned. That's all we can do, is warn you. If you don't heed the warning, nothing else anybody can do. And I continue. But in California's fantasy land, one is rewarded for wrecking a state, and in 2001, Schiff won a congressional seat and today represents perhaps the looniest constituents in America, the most out of touch. Hollywood and the surrounding areas. As a congressman, Schiff continued to score high with the hard left groups, receiving a perfect or near perfect score from groups that attack votes related to unions, guns, abortions, fiscal issues, tax and spend issues, and so on. Interestingly, Schiff consistently votes perfect with Planned Parenthood, even to preserve late-term abortions, while also voting for every single animal rights bill, an intellectual pretzel that's difficult to comprehend. Quote, kills human babies, saves mice. Unquote. His latest ratings from FreedomWorks and Club for Growth and the ACU are 0, something difficult to achieve unless you really believe every single government spending, tax and regulatory bill is swell and you have absolutely no understanding of the free market. Indeed, in the latest ratings by the Club for Growth on purely pork-orientated votes, Schiff voted 68 out of 68 times to support a shady form of crony capitalism. There is little doubt that despite his contrived moderate image, Schiff is a die-hard leftist who I am sure would be quite comfortable as an administrator in, say, Cuba's Byzantine socialist government. And the piece continues. Beginning to get a picture of this guy? Because I certainly am. This is from the Conservative Treehouse, and it covers an interview with Major Jarrett. There are many people who wonder why any Democrat, particularly Adam Schiff, would continue clinging to the narrative despite a contrary evidence that disproves it. The answer is really quite simple. There's nothing to lose. Much like a bank robber killing a police officer, once the initial capital felony is committed, there is no greater punishment for subsequent actions. The foundational lies are of such significance there is no punitive or political downside to dissuade further lying built on the originating falsehood. Twice in this interview, Major Garrett asks the ranking member of the HPSCI if he is certain that the DOJ and the FBI followed proper procedures and presented proper evidence in gaining the FISA court Title I surveillance warrant over Carter Page. Note how Adam Schiff is in California Friday night appearing on Bill Maher and maximizing the political benefit of his narrative construction instead of actually working to clear up his memo construct and release it. It's not the memo that's important to him, it's the political narrative he creates. Also, don't be naive not to accept that Major Garrett doesn't know what Schiff is up to. He does. Garrett is simply falling back upon the increasing overuse of the Mamet principle, pretending not to know some things, i.e. motives and intents. Garrett's emotional tribal credibility is in conflict with his intellectual professional responsibility. Garrett knows exactly what decisions he's making, and so should we. Ultimately, this is one of the saddest outcomes of this entire fiasco. Much like the Joe Manchin inherently wanting to applaud during the State of the Union, but catching himself mentally as he weighed the pros and cons. Garrett knows he could deconstruct this Schiff presentation with minimal effort, yet he makes a conscious decision to give up part of his own intellectual honesty in order to remain in the tribe. I'm not going to play that piece, but if you go to that link, you'll find it. There are so many instances of Shifty Schiff and his political antic trying to make a name for himself. I think he's done that in spades, just like many other Democrats, who are a laughingstock on the international stage. Rather than looking like a legislative leader, he leads a band of Democrats who look like a band of clowns. If you look at his district he represents, it covers such areas as Burbank, West Hollywood and Glendale. Burbank, by the way, if you have no idea, is where the headquarters of NBC is. Those are just some of the notable places. And what I've read out to you are just some of the notable pieces. One piece that I didn't read out because it was incredibly long was from American Greatness. In it, they talked about the non-stop vendetta that Schiff has been waging against the president ever since he was elected. I intend to go into that aspect in much greater detail in a future episode. But for now, what I want to concentrate on is a particular snippet that I found, which was a particularly interesting snippet that I found inside this long piece, talking about Schiff's real aspirations. Please note, Adam Schiff is referenced here as Pathfinder, for reasons I know not why. Here's part of that piece. It's a very small clip. My radio colleague, John Batchelor, has pegged US Representative Adam Schiff, Democrat California, as Pathfinder, the reason being that he is a ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Schiff is the most vocal and visible in trying to divine the truth behind the alleged collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, and in a fortuitous confluence of circumstances for Schiff, find a path to taking Senator Feinstein's Senate seat. Whether the truth will out and Pathfinder will oust Feinstein remains to be seen, as does any evidence the Pathfinder insinuates exists to prove the Trump-Putin collusion allegation. It's a mouthful. But there we have it, right at the very end. Could it be, ladies and gentlemen, the reason that Shifty Schiff is really trying to make the headlines all the time is he's after one of the top jobs in Congress, that of a Senate seat when Senator Feinstein resigns? Or does he try and push her out? Only time will tell, won't it? Now, we all know how left California is, and Schiff comes from Massachusetts, by the way, another state that is permanently leaning left and permanently in debt with their social programs. It's not surprising how devious these Democrats are. Like all liberals, as we know in Canada, all too well, they will say anything, they will do anything to get into power and to stay in power, as we know also in Canada, as they have the backing of the mainstream media, who will cover up as much as they can of their lies and corruption. And when, finally, in the case of Shifty Schiff, he steals his Senate seat, he will attack even more, because these people in every Western country are neither democratic nor believe in democracy and the free market. They are all from an elite group, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, in the case of Americans. Isn't it way past time that quotas are put on lawyers entering politics? How about, I don't know, businessmen and women, people who actually know how to create things, rather than people who know how to destroy things? Schiff and others of his ilk, both in the United States, Canada and around the world, clearly need to be investigated. They are corrupt, they seek power not for the good of the people, but to control the reins of power and to subjugate their citizens. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my comment on Mr. Schiff and others of his ilk. You can find more at aradio.wordpress.com, where you can find links to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Gab and email. We're also on Spotify. Just go to the podcast section and type Canadian Politics with a twist and you'll find us. We are continuing to reach out to you, so please pass on these links. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. You can listen to all our morning moments at Spreaker.com under A Radio. That's EHRADIO, A Radio, and click on the like button. And you can hear a review of our morning moments on WHBJ-DB, News, Talk, Radio on Spreaker.com. Join us and many others. And you can find all our podcasts and morning moments at aradio.wordpress.com. Click on the Morning Moments tab.